You know, you don't really understand war when you're in the middle of the crossfire. You're just trying to survive to the next minute. The root of all the blood my generation spilled in that country started way before we were even old enough to lace up our boots. Back in 1938, Europe was a party. France was swimming in the cash they were squeezing out of Germany after the First World War. They thought they owned the world, including a piece of jungle on the other side of the planet called Indochina. They thought the Germans were just going to take the humiliation quietly. Well, the very next year, the Nazis marched on Paris. With the French on their knees, Japan saw an open door and invaded Indochina in 1940. That's when that place really started to boil. A guy named Ho Chi Minh rallied his people, formed an army called the Viet Minh, and took to the jungle to fight the Japanese. When we Americans dropped the atomic bombs and Japan surrendered, the Vietnamese thought they were finally going to be the masters of their own backyard. They basically told the Japanese, "You can go ahead and leave now." But the suits in Europe had other plans. France wanted its colony back. And you know what our government did? We bankrolled the French. We were at the dawn of the Cold War. Washington and Moscow were too terrified of the idea of a nuclear war to face each other directly, so we started funding other people's wars. Us and the British footed the bill for the French, while the Soviets and China backed the Viet Minh. President Eisenhower looked at the bloodbath over there and thought, "I don't want to pull our boys out of Korea just to send them straight into Vietnam." But in 1954, the French took a beating that went down in history, and the country was split in two. The North went to the Communists, and the South became a republic. Laos and Cambodia got their independence. But do you think Ho Chi Minh swallowed that division? Never. The North started arming rebel groups in the South, the guys we'd come to know as the Viet Cong. In Washington, the panic was the domino theory. The fear that if Vietnam fell to communism, Cambodia, Laos, and all of Asia would fall right along with it. President Kennedy started sending military advisors. I had older buddies in that batch. They had no idea about the hell that is guerrilla warfare. The enemy would rise out of the dirt, take a shot, and vanish like smoke. We suffered defeats that didn't even make sense on paper. To make matters worse, the South was a corrupt mess. They even assassinated their own president in a coup. The North took advantage of the chaos and tightened the noose. Then came 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. To this day, veterans like me wonder what really happened in those waters between our Navy and theirs, but it didn't matter. President Johnson used it as the perfect pretext. In 1965, we started bombing the North, and in March, the first 3,500 Marines landed. Soon enough, there'd be 200,000 of us. We rained fire on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, trying to cut off their supply line, but it seemed like nothing could stop that anthill. We were stuck on bases in the South, just taking a pounding, fighting to defend an imaginary border thousands of miles away from our homes. Morale sank into the mud of the trenches. That's when General Westmoreland looked at the mess and made a decision. Staying on the defensive was getting us killed. It was time to hunt the enemy. It was time to attack. And just like that, because of decisions made at fancy tables oceans away, we were thrown straight into the jaws of the jungle.